Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports, where today the first round of the 2025 NHL playoffs has just concluded, and it's time to reflect on that and look at the second round of the NHL playoffs. Guys, thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports. Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports. Make sure you've subscribed down below, youtube.com/NHL on I-80 Sports. What did you guys think of the first round, and what are you excited to see in the second round? Let us know down below. Comment to join the conversation, and hit the like button if you like our content. And make sure you hit the bell notifications so that way you know when our content goes live. And away we go. It's amazing that we're already out of the first round. I'm Brian. He's Tom. Tom, how you doing today?
Doing well, and here we are. It was a good first round, I'd say. I don't know if it was the most epic first round ever. There were some epic series, but it wasn't the worst first round ever. I'd say it was a fairly decent first round, I must say. And here we are on to the second round now.
It was a good first round with an amazing Game 7 matchup that we'll talk about in just a little bit.
Two of them, actually.
Yeah. So let's reflect first on the first round right now. So let's talk about what happened in the first round. Going from the East Coast to the West Coast, we had Toronto versus Ottawa, and Toronto coming up on top in that matchup, 4-2, winning in 6 games. Then over to Tampa Bay and Florida, which in my mind should have been an Eastern Conference final matchup, but different discussion for a different day. Florida winning that matchup in 5 games, 4-1. Then Washington taking on Montreal. Washington coming out pretty decisively on top, 4-1 in 5 games. Speaking of decisive victories as well, the Carolina Hurricane faced off against the New Jersey Devils. And again, pretty decisive matchup. 5-game series. Carolina comes out on top, 4-1. On the West Coast side of things, we had a couple nail biters in this particular coast. The Winnipeg Jets taking on the St. Louis Blues, going all the way to the brink, Game 7, and Winnipeg just coming out on top, 4-3 in a nail biter. Speaking of nail biters, another possible Western Conference final matchup occurred. Dallas versus Colorado, and as I alluded to before, one of the greatest Game 7s that I think we have ever seen, and greatest Game 7 performances we have ever seen from Mikko Rantanen of the Dallas Stars, not the Colorado Avalanche, with Dallas coming out on top, 4-3 in 7 games. Vegas Golden Knights took on the Minnesota Wild. They came out on top in that series, 4-2 in a 6-game series there. And finally, the Edmonton Oilers taking on the LA Kings, with Edmonton coming out on top, 4-2 in 6 games. Now, we are currently in the midst of the second round. We are a day late on getting this video out. So as of right now, the matchups that we're going to be previewing tonight, the Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Florida Panthers, which Toronto is already up 1-0 in that series. The Carolina Hurricane versus the Washington Capitals, which Carolina is up 1-0 in that series after an overtime winner from Jacob Slavin. The Edmonton Oilers versus the Vegas Golden Knights, which Edmonton coming out on top as well, 1-0 in that series so far. And the Winnipeg Jets versus the Dallas Stars, which has not started yet. It is starting tonight at 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. But let's talk a little bit about this first round real quick, Tom. Were there surprises to you in this first round? Is it, kind of, what we expected? What did you feel about the first round?
Well, the surprises in this first round to me were teams that didn't win their series. And I wouldn't say they were surprises as opposed to, say, disappointments. I don't think there were any upsets this first round. I think just about every series, the team that you thought was going to win won, maybe except for one of them. Really what surprised me is, number one, let's stay in the East real fast. How bad the Tampa Bay Lightning played. That was a surprise. I thought Tampa was going to take that series. I thought Florida was out of gas. I thought, a run to the finals, a run to the cup, I thought they were done. Florida goes into Tampa, takes care of business, 6-2 and 2-0, and you figure, oh no, the Bolts are cooked. Bolts go back to Florida for game 3. They dominate them in game 3 with a 5-1 win. And then you say, okay, maybe this series is turning on its head. Maybe this is Florida's last gasp. Wasn't to be. Tampa showed a little bit of resiliency in game 4. We're up 2-1, and then just totally blew it in the third period with goals by Aaron Ekblad and Seth Jones for the Panthers. It went back to Amalie Arena for game 3, and basically that was all she wrote for the Bolts. It was 2-2 at the end of the first, and then that was it. It was all Florida after that. I never in a million years thought the series was going to be over in 5 games. Myself and a lot of others included thought that the Bolts were going to march right through the East, potentially win another cup. Didn't happen. The thing with Tampa is, I don't know if there's going to be so many repercussions here. A lot of people said John Cooper was going to leave. That's not happening. John Cooper has announced his intention to stay. They've announced their intention to keep contending. They're not tearing anything down. They're going to try to improve and go forward again next year. But yeah, this was a real surprise for me, at least with the Bolts. I did not think that they were going to play this bad and get outclassed this bad. Almost similar to the way they got outclassed last year against Florida. And I thought that they were going to upset them last year as well.
Yeah. It's funny because I don't want to say like I told a lot of people so when it came to Florida, but I told you so. That don't underestimate the Florida Panthers, and that the Sam Bennett, Matt Tkachuk, and Brad Marchand connection was going to be a problem. And it was a problem for Tampa.
Much,
huh?
They didn't play together much, though.
No, they didn't play together much, but just their presence on the ice when any of them were on was felt at all times. Sam Bennett made his presence known, making his presence known already, Toronto versus Florida right now, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Brad Marchand playing some good, steady hockey, and Matt Tkachuk played very good in the first round. He played very, very well. So I wasn't more so surprised that Florida came out on top in that series. I'm more so surprised by Tampa Bay only winning one of those games. And I know this isn't the same Tampa Bay Lightning team from the back-to-back in 2020, 2021, but they are still a very good team, and I would have liked to see them play a little bit harder against Florida, but I don't think they just really didn't have any answers. But Bobrovsky also played very well in that for the Florida Panthers, as well as played decently as well. But I don't think there's any real major repercussions for the Tampa Bay Lightning here. There's still next year to look forward to. I think they're going to stay competitive next year, but it does leave the question of, with salary cap issues kind of coming up, is there going to be another pricey name that gets traded off to try to make room for other guys that need contracts? Last year we saw Mikhail Sergachev get traded over to Utah, but now the Utah Mammoth, we can officially say that. But, is there another move down the pipeline for the Tampa Bay Lightning? There are some murmurs from people, which I don't agree with at all, and I don't think that it would be the right move, that maybe Anthony Cirelli is a name that you look at, but I think that would be a terrible move. I think he's a glue guy in Tampa Bay. Or are you looking maybe to trade elsewhere from this lineup? Who knows? I think Tampa Bay is going to stay competitive next year. I think John Cooper is going to stay as the head coach in Tampa Bay. I don't think he's going to look to leave just yet. Maybe we get out past next year. Maybe we start talking a little bit more about that, but I don't see that really happening at all right now. The other surprise to me was the Colorado Avalanche, and just getting completely outclassed and schooled by their own former superstar, Mikko Rantanen, in Game 7 in the third period. I mean, Tom, since Mark Messier, have we seen a performance like that?
Chris Kreider last year. I'm just saying, but yeah, that was something of legend, really legendary stuff, and that could go down, right up there with Bruins Habs in 79, Rangers Devils in 97. I mean, you name it, that could go down as a legendary Game 7 in playoff history. And the funny part about Colorado is, yet again, Colorado's issues always seem to be after they won was that they never really addressed their depth. Obviously, McKinnon's a superstar. Obviously, McCarr is a superstar. Obviously, those guys are going to do what they're going to do. Their other issue over the years was goaltending. So this year, what did they do? They finally addressed their goaltending. It wasn't Vezina Trophy-esque goaltending, but it was a good 1-2 tandem of Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood. Regardless of that, I don't think either one of them is better than Jake Ottinger. Let's just say it. They weren't better. Their other issue was always their depth. They never really found that second line center to play behind McKinnon after Nazem Kadri left. I don't know if Brock Nelson was the guy, and it's proven that he wasn't. He showed up. He played. They really did address their depth. They brought Charlie Coyle in. They brought Jack Drury in with that trade. Their first line of Lankinen, McKinnon, and Natchez was great. Gabriel Landeskog came back to play. And a lot of us were saying, as good as Dallas is, they have that depth, but Dallas doesn't have a game breaker like, say, Nathan McKinnon. They just don't have that guy. It's just not going to happen for them. This will finally be the year maybe Colorado gets over the hump. And it seemed kind of that way after game one. Colorado smacked Dallas 5-1. But then after that, it just was head scratchers over and over. They had a 5-1 win, a 4-0 win, and a 7-4 win. The problem with Colorado is this, and this has been their MO in this basic McKinnon and McCarr era. They're never a team that can win in tight spots. They've never been able to win a game 7. The year they won the cup, all those series, the furthest any of those series went was 6 games. And in those series that went 6 games, they had 3-1 leads in those series where they lost game 5 and just went out and won game 6. This series was a microcosm of that for the Avalanche. There were 2 games, game 2, and even game 2 and game 3, where they had third period leads. I was going to say game 2 and game 5, but I was going to be wrong. Where they had third period leads that they blew. Whereas one of those games, they didn't blow that third period lead. They would have been walking out of this series 4-2. So you know what? They go down. They have the series tied at 2. They lose 6-2 in game 5 in Dallas. You figure this thing is over. They come back to Colorado. It's kind of a tug of war in that game. Game is 4-4 going into the third, and you figure, okay, this is tight. Colorado's not going to be able to do it. They come back and have a good third period. They win 7-4, and you figure, okay, now's their chance. So in game 2, they go up 2-0. Nathan McKinnon scores his 7th playoff goal of the series, and you say, okay, they're finally going to get over the hump. This is finally it. And I'm even echoing the sentiment that I echo with Carolina Hurricanes, who we'll talk about in a little while, where maybe instead of Carolina being that San Jose Sharks-esque team that always has the personnel but can't get it done, maybe it's this Dallas Stars team. You know, they got to the conference finals the last 2 years, and now they're going to go home in the first round. Well, the player they burned came back and burned them. Mikko Rantanen, 3 goals, 1 assist in that third period to knock his former team out and to send a Dallas Stars team into the second round of the playoffs that they have a very good chance of winning. My thing with Dallas was always, and I've said it in previous episodes and previous years in playoffs, is there was never that game breaker on Dallas. For all the talent they had, for all the depth they had, they always were one of those teams with that game breaker, and they never had that game breaker. And it was looking like this until the third period, especially with Nathan McKinnon scoring that second goal. Well, that game breaker, they didn't pick him up from Colorado. They picked him up from Carolina, but he was with Colorado to start the year, and he was very pissed off at his old team. And Mikko Rantanen went out and just took the Dallas Stars on his shoulders and won that game 7. Besides that, Colorado, now what do you do? Now what do you do? A lot of us, including myself right here, when that buzzer went off in Tampa 3 years ago, I thought we were looking at the class of the league. I thought we were looking at the next dynasty. It hasn't happened. You know, they were injured most of the year in 2023, lost to Seattle. Last year, they outclassed Winnipeg, blew by them. You figure, okay, they got a chance to get themselves in the conference finals. They just got to beat Dallas. They lost to Dallas again. Dallas has always been their kryptonite, and Dallas was their kryptonite yet again now. And now with Colorado, what do you really do? The league now, the trend in the league is teams are making deals for superstars. They're making controversial trades. They're bringing in guys. They're bringing in good players to bolster their first and second lines, to bolster their depth. Colorado lost a good player. No disrespect to Martin Necas, but you look up and down that lineup and you get past McKinnon and you get past McCarr, and as good of a support piece as Necas has been, the team's pretty thin. They gave up a lot of draft picks for short-term health. I don't know who they may be able to attract in free agency, if anybody would go there. I don't know if Mitch Marner would want to go there. Maybe Brad Marchand would want to go there to play with his provincial mate, Nathan McKinnon. I don't really know. But for a team that a lot of us thought was going to be a dynasty 3 years ago, and you figured at this point you'd be thinking that they'd maybe have 2 cups, They still have the one and haven't even come close since. So, yeah, Colorado, man, I don't know what's going on there. I don't know what they're going to do, but something needs to change.
I'll say it even simpler when it comes to the surprise in Colorado. Colorado got beat by a Dallas team who, by all intents and purposes, played without their top defenseman, Miro Heiskanen, and their top forward in Jason Robertson. Because we can argue that Mikko Rantanen's their top forward. To me, it's still Jason Robertson's team, 1,000%. But Colorado couldn't beat a handicapped Dallas team. Now, admittedly, you had other factors there. You got out-goalied by Jake Ottinger as well. And there's no knock to Mackenzie Blackwood. He is certainly an upgrade in net over Alexander Georgiev from last year and midway through this year. But there are some question marks. Now, General Manager Joe Sakic has already come out and said in regards to the Mikko Rantanen negotiation and in terms to extending him that, he didn't want to land himself in trouble by, signing another big contract and then not having room to sign a support cast for guys like Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar. But it also seems like that was not a discussion that was even made with Jared Bednar or with Nathan MacKinnon or with Cale Makar. So I think all of a sudden Joe Sakic went from an untouchable GM who could do no wrong in Colorado to all of a sudden he is on a hot seat in Colorado. And I think we have reached a crossroads here for Colorado, a very important crossroads where they could go one of two ways. They can retool from this, use the money that they're saving and not signing Mikko Rantanen and really building that bottom six in Colorado and even trying to get a true second line center. Or could we be talking about in the next few years, Nathan MacKinnon wanting out of Colorado completely and saying, you know what, when my contract's up, I'm going to greener and greater pastures. The salary cap's going up. I could go somewhere where I can get paid what I'm really worth and not have to give Colorado a hometown discount to stay and not show loyalty because I don't feel like loyalty's been shown to me. It's going to be a really interesting summer for Colorado, and they're going to be a team that's going to be under a microscope this summer because of this first round exit. And I've said before, this should have been a Western Conference final matchup, and sure, we can argue with that all the live long day that it should have been a 1-8 seeding in the playoffs, but that's a totally separate discussion.
I want to say one thing with this, though. If it was the traditional 1 versus 8, then the 3 versus 6 would have been Dallas versus Edmonton, and people would have been complaining about that and said, well, if it was a divisional matchup, Edmonton or Dallas would have gotten through. Then them two would have had to play each other, and you would have seen Colorado and LA in the first round.
You see, you can't please everybody. Plain and simple. You can't please everybody. The last thing I wanted to mention from the first round was I know Tom's going to say that he wasn't shocked, but I don't care. I was shocked by the play of Connor Hellebuck and really, really surprised at just how incompetent he looked at times. Now, he redeemed himself from the second period onward in Game 7 against St. Louis. He redeemed himself pretty well. But is it enough redemption for just how much he imploded in the first round against St. Louis? If he did this against St. Louis, and St. Louis is a good team, what the heck's going to happen against Dallas? And is Paul Maurice not Paul Maurice. Oh my God, I'm thinking about old Winnipeg. Scott Arniel, right?
Yeah, Scott Arniel.
Yeah. Is he going to, my brain stuck a few years ago. Is he going to consider giving Hellebuck a shorter leash against Dallas? What do you think here, Tom?
It's quite possible. We really have to see. He was echoing, and I hate to use this comparison, he was echoing shades of Roberto Luongo back in 2011 in that series. The main difference here is that when St. Louis went up 2-0 and 3-1 in that game, Winnipeg kept fighting back. I thought it was over 3-1. And he really was echoing shades of what Roberto Luongo did with Vancouver, where they were dominant all year, President's Trophy winner. And then when they needed their goalie to make a big stop in a playoff series, he couldn't do it. The difference with Luongo is this was in the Stanley Cup Finals. We're talking about round 1 here, a 1-versus-8 matchup, basically. As good as St. Louis has been, they were still the 8th seed. And it's going to be real interesting because now the footsteps are getting louder with Hellebuck. He has never been a good playoff goalie. And if you go back to Four Nations this year, he got outdueled by Binnington in the one game. Now, I understand he outdueled Binnington here in the important Game 7, but there were 3 games this series. He got pulled. He got pulled in St. Louis. And I'll go back even further. There was that second Canada goal in the Four Nations. I can't remember who scored it. I apologize. That I think that Hellebuck should have had. And it was yet again Hellebuck not being able to show up for big moments. There was I watched that goal again. It is as much as it sickens me to rewatch that championship game from that tournament. I watched that second goal again, and here I'm just looking at the stats again. It was a goal scored by Sam Bennett, of all people. Sam Bennett scored that goal to tie that game. It was a weak goal that I thought Hellebuck should have had, and that's where I'm sitting there saying, is this guy really cut out to play in big moments? So we'll talk about that in a little bit, too, as a certain person might be paying a little extra attention to this series as well. But it's going to be very interesting now because I feel like Ottinger had a fairly good series for Dallas, and I feel like Dallas just might be a bit deeper as well.
Yeah, it is all going to be previewed as well. Connor Hellebuck's going to come up again when we preview Winnipeg and Dallas, which, speaking of previews here, let's get into this second round preview and predictions. Toronto Maple Leafs versus Florida Panthers. Now, they are currently playing game 2 at the moment, and midway through the first period, the Florida Panthers are up 1-0 against Toronto. And Toronto, in general, right now is up 1-0 in the series. So, Tom, predictions here. Who wins this series? Who goes on to the Eastern Conference Finals? And what do you expect to see in this series?
Well, I expect to see a lot of what we are expecting to see. A heavy physical game from Florida and more just a finesse kind of a picture-perfect game from the Leafs. Now, you look up and down these teams, it's obvious, goaltending, throw it out the window, Florida's got the advantage. Go back on D, Florida has the advantage too, I would say. You look at Florida's D and the D-core that they have versus what Toronto has, I think is better. I do. I think, you look, especially the top 4, Forsling and Ekblad, I reckon to say is better than McCabe and Tanev. Mikkola and Jones would reckon to say is better than Riley and Carlo. And Simone Benoit and OEL, I would say Nate Schmidt. I'd say that's probably it, even with Nate Schmidt and Dmitry Kulikov. You go up the lineup, you go to their forward pairs. Their forward lines, rather. And I actually will give this to Toronto. As great as Sasha Barkov is, as great as Matthew Tkachuk is, as great as Sam Bennett is, as great as Anton Lundell is, I got to give it to the Leafs. The Leafs really figured it out this year with their depth. You still have your big 4 playing in the top 2. Matthew Knies has been a welcome surprise for the Leafs on that first line with Austin Matthews. Max Pacioretty's been chipping in with Tavares and Nylander. And then on line 3 and line 4, you have Scott Laughton and Max Domi carrying lines 3 and line 4. So I would give that to the Leafs. I would give the forward advantage to the Leafs. So it's real interesting here. The Leafs smacked them up pretty badly the other night. But at the same time, didn't the Boston Bruins do the same thing here? This is a hard one for me to say because as much as I want to say Florida's just going to go right through this, at what point is Florida going to run out of gas? They went to the finals 2 years ago. They won the cup last year. At what point is the mileage going to catch up with this team? Right now, they're up 1-0 on a Sasha Barkov goal, and the Leafs were very shaky in game 1. It looked like a dominant performance until the third period where they had to scratch and claw it. It's a tough one to call here. It really is. I could easily see this going 7. It's hard for me. Right now, my head is saying the Leafs, but with Florida up and Florida's penchant for, being able to go deep and being able to, outmuscle other teams, I got to say Florida in 7 right now, as much as I don't want to. I want to say the Leafs. I do think the Leafs have turned over a new leaf. I know it's really stupid thing to say. They have a better coach now in Craig Berube. Obviously, Florida won the cup last year, and they are at some point going to run out of gas. but we have to see. I would say the safe bet right now is Florida in 7. But it's really going to come down to what happens in these games in Florida as well. Remember last year in Boston, there was a controversial call in that 4th game with the Panthers and the Bruins, whereas the Bruins may have won that 4th game and may have moved on and may have beat the Panthers in game 7. So I don't know. But right now, I guess I'll stick with the safe bet, and I'll go with the Panthers, but I'll go with the 7 games.
So for me, I could see this series going either which way as well. I would think, in my mind, that Florida is probably the likelier team to come out of this matchup. Only because I think I like their lineup just a little bit more. Like if we're kind of comparing and contrasting right now, the lineups, which actually I'm pulling up the lineups right now from Daily Faceoff just to kind of compare for myself at the moment. So looking at Florida's lineup first, the first line of Carter Verhaeghe, Alexander Barkov, Sam Reinhart, comparative to Toronto's top line of Matthew Nyes, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner. That's a pretty hard push in terms of like which line is better. I think in my mind, the Austin Matthews line for Toronto might have more potential, but realistic output, I think Florida's top line has a good floor, but not as high a ceiling. Looking at the second line for Florida, Evan Rodriguez, Sam Bennett, Matt Tkachuk, comparative to Toronto's second line of Max Pacioretty, John Tavares, Willie Nylander. I think I like Toronto's second line just a little bit more, just simply because of William Nylander, who has been a goal machine in the playoffs so far. And I think he's going to be a real X factor here for the Toronto Maple Leafs. A guy like William Nylander can absolutely break games wide open for Toronto if he gets hot. And then obviously a guy like Matthew Nyes, like leaving him on a breakaway in game 1, I knew immediately when he went on that breakaway that he was scoring that goal. I think everybody kind of had that feeling as well. But then you get to this bottom 6. You look at Toronto's bottom 6, Stephen Lorenz, Scott Lawton, Cale Yarncroc, Bobby McMahon, Max Domi, Pontus Holmberg, and then compare that to Florida with Eetu Luostarinen, Anton Lundell, Brad Marchand, Mackie Samoskevich, Nico Sturm, Jesper Boqvist. That third line for Florida, I think I like better than Toronto's at the moment. Eetu Luostarinen, Anton Lundell, Brad Marchand. I think that's a lot of teams' second line in most cases. Overall, I think Toronto's forward lines in general probably get the nod as like having, the edge. But then you get to the defense for Florida, and this is where I think Florida has the edge. Gustav Forsling, Aaron Ekblad, Nico Mikkola, Seth Jones, Nate Schmidt, Dmitry Kulikov. Comparing that to Toronto, who has gotten stronger defense this year in general, from Jake McCabe, Chris Tanev, Morgan Riley, Brandon Carlos, Simone Benoit, and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I think Florida has just a slight edge over that. So really, the big push here is going to be in net. And right now, Sergei Bobrovsky versus Joseph Woll or Anthony Stolarz, if he's able to come back in this series. Bobrovsky, no matter what, I think gets the nod here. I mean, Anthony Stolarz, if he was playing in this matchup right now, former backup goaltender facing, former team, it's a match made in heaven, but unfortunately Sam Bennett had other ideas. Overall, I think that this could really go the distance. This is going to be a very good matchup. Looking at the update right now, it's still 1-0 Florida nearing the end of the first period.
Leafs on a power play. Cool. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in my mind, I think Florida wins in 7 games. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes 6 and Florida takes it, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Toronto takes it in game 7 too. I think a lot of people are kind of taking Toronto here in this matchup as well. I think mostly because a lot of people are salivating over the idea of a Toronto Edmonton Stanley Cup, honestly, for the revenue.
Would be nice.
Would be nice. Moving on to the other Eastern Conference matchup, we've got the Washington Capitals, which I had to break out the retro here. I love this jersey. I've always had this, and I needed an excuse to wear it. The other not Florida jersey, the other Washington jersey I've got is an OV jersey. So,
but here's what I don't understand. I know everybody loves that jersey, but that jersey represents like when they would barely make the playoffs, when they lost to Detroit. Yeah. And the one they have now is the one they won the cup. And I sit here, and this is completely off topic now, but I look at what LA did this year with their jerseys, and they went back to the early 90s Gretzky era logo, and I go, okay, great. You had Gretzky then. You went to one final and lost to a superior Montreal team, and you ditched your old logo, and your old logo represents those 2 cups in 3 years with Kopitar and Brown and Doughty and Jeff Carter and all them.
Yep.
To me, it just doesn't make sense. Anyways,
it's a downgrade.
It's a downgrade. It doesn't make sense to me. That's just besides the point.
Yeah, no, and I get that. I mean, for me, this jersey as well as the black bell jerseys to me, like, always kind of signified of just like, okay, cool. You had Jaromir Jagr at that point. You had Ole the goalie.
Leafs just tied it, by the way.
Oh, okay. They tied it on the power play. Nice.
Yep.
But anyway, we got to get into this preview here. Washington Capitals versus Carolina Hurricanes. Tom, we're going to start here with you. Keys to this matchup and your overall prediction here. Who wins?
I mean, the real keys to this matchup it's the depth. It really is the depth. We know who Alexander Ovechkin is. We also know he's 39 years old. We know that I would say the goaltending, is probably a wash. It's not great goaltending on either side. It's goalies who can get you there, but neither one of these guys are ever winning a Vezina trophy. Neither one of these guys are ever probably getting a nod for their country in a big international tournament. I would say this goaltending is a wash. It's a wash. So now let's move to the D. Because I'm going to go backwards because I went backwards in the last one, so I'm just going to keep the trend going. You look at the D, you look at the pairing. Chychrun and Carlson, solid pairing. Going up against Slavin and Burns. And Slavin is younger and has proved himself to be the best defensive defenseman in the game this year. Second D pair. Orlov and Chatfield. Solid pair versus Sandin and Roy. Third D pair. Alexiev and Middletown, New Jersey native Trevor Van Riemsdyk versus Shane Gostisbehere and Sean Walker. This is a wash. This is not a wash. This is a landslide advantage for the Carolina Hurricanes. Doesn't even come close. So let's go to the forwards now. We'll go with the forwards. You have Beauvillier, Strome, and Ovechkin. Beauvillier, proven playoff performer. Strome, been punching above his weight most of the year. And you know what? Something here, though. What are these lines showing me? That's weird. Because I don't see Protas in here, which he played last night.
Yeah, I noticed the same exact thing. I noticed that they don't have Protas in this particular lineup. But honestly, you could probably factor Alexei Protas probably playing on that top left wing side with instead of Anthony Beauvillier.
Yeah, I'm sitting there. I'm wondering where he is because he's been huge.
Actually, no. Alexei Protas, they're actually playing on the fourth line.
Oh, he's on the fourth line. Okay.
Line
they were bumping him up to the first line last night, and that's what was confusing me, and I apologize.
Yeah, the Washington's always been with Spencer Carberry. He's been adjusting on the fly quite a bit and just playing the matchup.
Yeah, that's fine. So Beauvillier, Strome, and Ovechkin. We know who Ovechkin is. I'll say it again. The greatest regular season goal scorer in history, and I do mean that by regular season.
The dig.
And you look at that other line. Svechnikov, Aho, and Jackson Blake. As good as Ovechkin is, I'll take that first line for Carolina any day of the week. Second line for Carolina. Taylor Hall, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Logan Stankoven, who has been nothing short of great with the Canes this year. Versus Connor McMichael, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Tom Wilson. We know what Tom Wilson can do. We know Dubois had a bounce-back year. I still take Carolina. Look at Carolina's third line. Jordan Martinook, old reliable Jordan Staal, Seth Jarvis. Versus Andrew Mangiapane, Lars Eller, Ryan Leonard. Ryan Leonard's been great for Washington. He's playing regular shifts after coming out of the NCAA this year. Guess what? I still take Carolina. Fourth line, Eric Robinson, Mark Jankowski, William Carrier versus Brandon Duhaime, Nick Dowden, the aforementioned Alexei Protas. Okay, maybe I'll give the fourth line to Washington. Point being is this: Washington, and I'll say it again, I hate to compare that. I hate to compare this. I hate to use this analogy because it bothers me, but it's something that I've noticed now in the last year. Washington kind of reminds me of my favorite team, the Rangers, last year. Really punched above their weight in a year where a lot of people thought that they wouldn't. The difference with this Washington team versus that Rangers team is they didn't have the elite goaltending the Rangers had. And I would reckon to say that, certain players like Vincent Trocheck and at the time Chris Kreider and Alexi Lafreniere were maybe better than the supporting cast Washington has. So with that being said, it's going to be a tight series. Carolina sits back at you and then comes at you 100 miles an hour. Washington is a heavy team on the puck. Unlike teams like Florida and Vegas, who we'll talk about later, I don't know if they're as deep as those teams. So I might get flack for this, and everybody might hate me for this. But I think the train is coming to an end. The Washington Capitals train this year comes to an end here. Carolina in 5. And I'll go even further on the prediction to say Washington next year may not repeat the efforts they put forth this year. And I think that this is it for Washington. I'm going with the Canes in 5. The Canes go back to the Eastern Conference Finals for a second time in 3 years.
I think it's a very bold take, and I honestly could see a scenario where that happens, especially if we have theatrics like last night with Jacob Slavin winning it in overtime for the Carolina Hurricanes. To me, this is a heavy matchup. Like, this is pretty evenly matched, at least in my mind. I know based on how you felt, Tom, that it doesn't feel as close as it does. I'll give you on the defensive side taking Carolina. Carolina structurally and soundly are the better defensive team for sure, with Slavin, Burns, Orlov, Chatfield, Gostabert, and Walker. They are for sure the superior defensive team. I don't think you're giving enough credit to this Washington team as an offensive unit, though. I don't think you're giving them enough credit. Now, looking at overall, like skating leaders team-wise in this matchup, you are going into a first round or second round. Carolina, in terms of goals for per game, we're at 3.5. Washington's not far behind at 3.17. In terms of top performers right now in the playoffs, which actually I just need to pull that up real quick because for whatever reason from my screen, it won't show me that. Dylan Strome, might be punching above his weight, but he still has 9 points in 6 games. Beyond just him, Alex Ovechkin still had 4 goals in 5 games for Washington last series. So he still played very well. Tom Wilson also keeping up that production from the regular season as well. 5 points in 5 games as well. Now, he didn't register a point last game, but his presence is still felt, and he's staying out of the box. And I think that's going to be a major factor here for the Washington Capitals. If they can stay out of the box and if they can play good, clean hockey and continue to what they did best in the regular season, which is jump up quickly on teams, I think they're going to be fine. That, and they're not just relying on Alex Ovechkin for the offense anymore. You've got guys on this team that are contributing. Tom Wilson, as I mentioned before, Connor McMichael, Alexi Protas. The arrival of Ryan Leonard has been a revelation also for Washington. I could see him maybe pulling some cinematics here in this series as well. So I think you need to give Washington a little bit more credit. I don't think this is going to be a 5-game series. Now, I know I said that last round and said like, oh, this is going to be really close. And then we saw like 5-game series. However, I do firmly believe that this is possibly going to go to distance. I think this is for sure going to be a 7-game series. But I'm going to say Washington comes out on top and just squeaks past the Carolina Hurricane. The downfall for the Carolina Hurricane is if Freddie can't stay healthy this round. They're going to live and die by Freddie Anderson, which when he's been healthy, Freddie Anderson has been one of the best goaltenders in the playoffs. but he is a glass cannon in my mind, and it's only going to take one play to make a difference here for Washington. And if Freddie doesn't have a good round, Carolina's not going to have a good round. And that's my firm take there, just given the goaltending matchup. Moving on here to the West Coast, looking at the Winnipeg Jets versus the Dallas Stars. To me, this seems pretty decisive, but I know that there's probably room for argument on this one. Tom, predictions here. Who do you think wins this series?
Well, it does seem fairly decisive to me as well. Winnipeg, like Washington, and I've said it all year, I was not buying what they were selling. And on top of all of that, caveat with this series is a certain person will probably need to be watching this series a little closely. That certain person is Team USA coach and now the newest New York Rangers coach, Mike Sullivan, needs to be watching this series closely to decide who he may need to start next year.
That just made you really happy to say that, didn't you? Just wanted to shoehorn that in.
I did. You know what? To be honest with you, I don't want to go off into a tangent here. I actually want to Rick Tocchet, but that's besides the point. We can talk about
that. We'll save it for our catch-up episode after the Stanley Cup.
I wanted Rick Tocchet, not saying that Mike Sullivan was a bad choice. Sullivan coached Team USA great this year. Besides the point. This is going to be a preview of who may very well get started not at the Olympics next year between Oettinger and between Hellebuck. Hellebuck faltered greatly in that series against St. Louis. Pulled 3 times. Not to say that Oettinger would stand on his head great either, but Oettinger, I would reckon to say, was better. Oettinger, he had a game where he let 5 in. He had a game where he let 7 in. Not to say he was great either. So, that being said, let's start at goaltending. And guess what? Just like last time, guess what? I would give the nod to Dallas by a hair right now. I would give it to Oettinger. He did have 2 bad games, but he wasn't so bad in the losses that they had to pull him. At least I don't think so. I don't think he was pulled in any of those losses, as far as I know. Let me just see real quick. No, Oettinger, the game he gave up 5, he stayed in all game. The game he gave up 7, he stayed in all game. So it wasn't because of bad goaltending that they lost those games. They stuck with their man Oettinger. So because of that, I will give the nod to Dallas with Oettinger, but it's not by like a landslide here, all right? So let's go to the D. As of right now, Miro Heiskanen is not playing. Didn't seem to be that big of a problem against Colorado. Look at what Winnipeg has. Luke Schenn and Colin Miller on their third pair versus Leon Bichel and Alex Petrovich. You would assume this would change if Heiskanen indeed plays. I would maybe give the nod to Winnipeg on that third pair. Second pair, Hayden Fleury, Dylan DeMello for the Jets versus Esa Lindell and Cody Ceci for Dallas. I'll give it to Dallas. Thomas Harley and Ilya Lyubushkin, first pair for Dallas versus Dylan Sandberg and Neil Pionk. Neil Pionk had a big goal in Game 7. I'm still giving it to Dallas. I really liked how Thomas Harley played against the Avs. I do. And now we go to the forwards. And I don't even know if I want to compare this because Mark Scheifele is questionable. Kyle Connor's been decent. I will give him that. Kyle Connor's been decent for the Jets. But I mean, you just look at what Dallas has. Look up and down. Okay. I just think Dallas with their forwards is just eons better here. Dallas is forward depth, and with Jason Robertson coming back. Eons and eons better. And Robertson is projected to slide in on the third line right now. I'm sorry. I can't sit here and say what Winnipeg has on forward is better than what Dallas has. I can't sit here and say it. I can't sit here and say that is better than what Dallas has. So that being said, while I don't think it's going to be a landslide of a series, I don't think that this is going to be a repeat 7-gamer either. I just don't think so. I'll be generous here. I'll say that Dallas is going to take this. And I'll say that they're going to take it as good as Kyle Connor's been with 12 points. I think he's really carrying Winnipeg. I do. So I'm going to say Dallas is going to take this thing in 6 games. Dallas goes to the conference finals again, third time in the last 4 years. There's just nothing that Winnipeg. If Hellebuck maybe played his head off in that first round and that didn't go 7, that was over in an easy 5 games, I'd maybe be inclined to say something nicer about Winnipeg, but I just can't bring myself to do it right now.
I'll keep it even simpler here and just say I think it's going to be Dallas in 6 games, and the real X factor here for Winnipeg is Connor Hellebuck. This team is going to live and die by Connor Hellebuck, and if he doesn't show up, then Dallas should have this handedly. If Connor Hellebuck shows up and shows out and plays like the Vezina, possibly even heart-winning trophy caliber goaltender that he was throughout this regular season, I think Dallas could be in real trouble. Dallas's firepower is going to have to show up in this series. And I know that Jason Robertson is questionable. He is likely going to make his return in this series. And slotting in on the third line with Wyatt Johnston and Mason Marchment, I think, is going to be a recipe for disaster for Winnipeg to have to try to cover that, as well as cover that second line of Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, and Matt Duchene, and also cover that first line of Mikael Granlund, Rupe Hintz, and Mikko Rantanen. Rupe Hintz, who doesn't get enough credit for probably being the most underrated center in all NHL right now. That and Jake Ottinger, if he continues to play well as well, I think is going to be electric for Dallas too. I say Dallas in 6. Last but not least, the Vegas Golden Knights versus the Edmonton Oilers. Tom, I'll start here with you. Who wins this series and why?
Well, again, we'll look at what we have here. I'm actually just looking at the point disparities between just because I'm curious to know something here between Dallas and Dallas and Winnipeg. And it was 12 points. Rantanen had 12 points and Connor had 12 points. After that, it was Wyatt Johnson with 7, Rope Hintz with 7. It was Appleton with 6, and then Scheifele with 6. And then after that, it drops off. It's fairly even, but I'm still giving it to Dallas. All right, we're on something different now, so we're going to go do something different. All right. So Vegas and Edmonton, they met 2 years ago. Vegas on their way to a Stanley Cup 2 years ago. I still didn't like that they won it. So let's start here, and we'll go back to the goaltending. Picard has been given the nod in the net for the Edmonton Oilers versus Adin Hill with the Vegas Golden Knights. It's yet again, neither of these guys are ever going to win a Vezina trophy. Neither of these guys are ever going to get looked on for a national team. Hill is a maybe, but I think after what Binnington did at 4 Nations this year, you could probably put that rumor to bed too. Goaltending, wash. We'll wash that one right out. Let's look at the D here. Third line, third pair for Vegas. Nicholas Hague, Caden Korzak versus what Edmonton has in Brett Kulak and Ty Emberson. Say it's fairly even. Maybe give a little bit of a nod to Edmonton. Edmonton's second pair, Jake Woolman and John Klingberg versus Noah Hannafin and Zach Whitecloud. I actually would give that to Vegas. And then the first pair is Brady McNabb and Shea Theodore for Vegas, only because Pietrangelo is hurt right now, versus Darnell Nurse and Evan Bouchard for Edmonton. I actually would still give that to Vegas. I might give the advantage on the back end to Vegas right now. Bouchard's a great offensive defenseman, and I don't take that away from him. I don't. I just don't know if Bouchard has any other qualities about that other than being a great offensive defenseman. So I would actually give that to Bouchard still at 9 points in 7 games, but still I would give that to Vegas. So now let's look at the forwards. Go fourth line versus fourth line. Put Pleasant, Janmark, and Arvidsson for Edmonton versus Pearson, Waugh, and Colasar for Vegas. I give that to Vegas. Frederick, Henrique, and Brown for Edmonton versus Howden, Carlson, and Smith. Again, I give it to Vegas. Then you have Saad, Hurdle, and Olofsson for Vegas versus Kane, RNH, and Hyman for Edmonton. This is a little more even. Where you have your decided advantage here is in the middle. I would take Hurdle over RNH. And then your first line, Draisaitl, McDavid, and Perry versus Barbashev, Eichel, and Stone. Obviously, Edmonton gets the win for the first line. But here's Edmonton again doing something that I don't like that they're doing. Playing Draisaitl and McDavid together. It's something I said they need to learn to get away from. They got away from it last year. They went to the finals. But, of course, things not working out is probably making them do it again. So here you would say that Vegas has every inconceivable advantage, right, with this. And you would say Vegas will probably take this series, right? Wrong. McDavid and Draisaitl finally went deep last year. Bouchard went deep. A lot of these guys went deep. Vegas has a lot of guys that went deep too. Vegas is a little bit on the older side, though. It's not going to be an easy series. I'm going to say Edmonton in 6 back into the Western Conference Finals. What happens after that is going to be a question. Despite Vegas on paper having the advantage, I got to give it to Edmonton because Connor McDavid has this uncanny ability to just go off when he needs to go off, to just pick up a team and carry him. He picked up, a lot of people said this year, he's not going to have a lot of work to do with Team Canada in the Four Nations. He took Edmonton last year to the Stanley Cup Finals. They lost. He was the first losing player, non-goalie since Reggie Leach in the 70s to win the Conn Smythe. McDavid will take Edmonton on his back in this series, and they will win it in 6. And same thing this year. All the talent on Team Canada, he stood out amongst everybody. So it's Edmonton for me with this one. It really is.
So based on your prediction, you've got Florida versus Carolina in the Eastern Conference Final and Dallas versus Edmonton in the Western Conference Final.
But that's a coin flip too, because I could, if Florida somehow runs out of gas, I could see the Leafs going. And if it's the Leafs lining up against Carolina, I could see the Leafs going into the finals.
Yeah, for once,
the first time since 1967, and with a chance to win. They can still cry about 93 all they want. They were not beating Montreal. Here. Prime example. We talk about top heavy versus depth. The Leafs were top heavy. You had Doug Gilmour, Dave Anderchuk, and Wendell Clark skating on your first line. You had Glenn Anderson on your second line. You didn't have a great number one defenseman. You had Felix Potvin in net. But then look at Montreal. You had some great defensemen back there. Matthew Schneider, Lyle Odeline, and Eric Desjardins. You had Kirk Muller and Vincent Damphousse up top, not as good as what they had. And then in net, you had the greatest goalie ever in Patrick Waugh. So there you go.
Yeah, this is true. For me, Vegas versus Edmonton. Vegas is, I think, more defensively sound than the Edmonton Oilers are, which is kind of crazy for me to say when I look at how improved this Edmonton defense is this year compared to last year. The biggest addition here and a real big X factor to me on Edmonton and their defensive core is Jake Wallman, acquisition from the San Jose Sharks earlier in the trade deadline. Wallman has been playing very well for Edmonton. I don't think he's getting enough credit for how good he looks on that blue line right now for Edmonton. He also has the highest plus minus in the playoffs so far as well amongst all active players. But I think there's a lot of validity to what you're talking about with Edmonton and not splitting up Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. However, it's really proven to actually work for them at the moment. Combined right now in 14 games between Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, they have 25 points in 14 games between the two of them right now, which is tied for the most points in the NHL playoffs this year. The only other players active right now in the playoffs that have that same amount of points at the moment is Willie Nylander for the Toronto Maple Leafs, Mikko Rantanen for the Dallas Stars, and Kyle Connor for the Winnipeg Jets. The difference there, obviously, is less games played for Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl comparative to those guys. But Edmonton, I think, in my mind, forward depth has the edge. And I know if we're comparing line by line, that Vegas might have the edge in the forward group, but I don't think it's as close as a lot of people realize. I mean, yeah, that second line for Vegas of Brandon Saad, Tomas Hertl, and Victor Olofsson is a very good second line. I don't know if that beats Evander Kane, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Zach Hyman if Evander Kane plays healthy this series, and if Zach Hyman plays healthy.
And Hertl got dinged up last night too, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him. Mm-hmm. I didn't even think that just hit me right now.
Yeah. And looking at the third line for Edmonton, this is a line I've been waiting to finally see since they acquired Trent Frederick, but Trent Frederick playing alongside Adam Henrique and Connor Brown, that is a line that I think is going to exhaust the Vegas Golden Knights. And Trent Frederick can absolutely stick up for his teammates. He is a rough and tough kid coming from Boston, who is not afraid to get played down in the dirty areas, played down in the corners, and fight for the puck, and just exhaust your goaltender by screening him in front as well. But a real X factor for the Vegas Golden Knights is going to be the reformation of William Karlsson and Riley Smith on that third line. All they're missing is Jonathan Marchessault to really, make it the original first line of the Vegas Golden Knights in their inception. But having 2/3 of it is certainly very good. And Riley Smith is very much a proven entity in the playoffs for the Vegas Golden Knights. Riley Smith might be older, but he can still perform. And if there's ever a guy that's going to get an important goal when it matters, Riley Smith is that guy for the Vegas Golden Knights. But I still think this forward group for Edmonton is currently stronger than Vegas's. With Vegas, it's going to be a matter of staying healthy. Hurdle, leaving during last night's game. Is he going to be okay for the rest of the series? That's going to be a storyline that we follow as well. Defensively, Edmonton has been playing better defense as of late. One factor in Edmonton's favor right now, too, is they currently sport the best goals per game right now as a team with 4.43 goals for per game at the moment. The only other teams that were close to them are two teams that were knocked out in the first round. That's the LA Kings and that's the St. Louis Blues. Obviously, the biggest obvious X factor right now of why Edmonton would not advance to the Western Conference Final is between the pipes. Calvin Pickard needs to have a good second round, and Pickard has been very good throughout the first round. He needs to continue playing the same way that he did against LA and shut down Vegas as well, and Edmonton's defense needs to do enough to do that as well. Now, Aiden Hill needs to step up here for the Vegas Golden Knights here as well. They've got Akira Schmid backing him up as well. Ideally, you don't want to bring in Schmid if you don't have to. That being said, in the very, very limited time that we saw Akira Schmid in the first round, he did do exactly what he needed to do for Vegas. He let in no goals. But Aiden Hill is your guy. And, he's got a lot that he needs to put up with against the Edmonton Oilers, against a very, very potent offense. I could see this series going a couple different ways. However, I'm still going to give the edge to the Edmonton Oilers. I say it's going to be Edmonton in 6 games in this particular series. I don't think it's going to go to distance. I don't think it's going to go 7, but I'm going to say conservatively that this is a game that goes 6 games, which would mean that for me, my Eastern Conference Final would be the Florida Panthers versus the Washington Capitals. And then in the Western Conference, it would be the Dallas Stars versus the Edmonton Oilers. Could we see a repeat of last year's final, Tom?
I don't know, because I'm going to tell you right now, Dallas has a certain player that they didn't have last year, and that may cause fits for those Edmonton Oilers. Yeah. Florida's up 2-1, by the way. The ghost of Boston Bruins past, Brad Marchand, put them up.
Hopefully, future New Jersey Devil, Brad Marchand. But
I think he's going to Colorado.
That's a conversation for a different day. But, guys, as usual, what do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree with our takes? Let us know down below and subscribe down below, youtube.com/NHL on I-80 Sports. Hit the bell notification so that way you know when our content goes live. Join the conversation down below. What are your predictions for the second round? We want to hear from you guys, and drop a like if you like our content as well. But enough of hearing us talk. We've got more playoff hockey to watch. Thanks for listening, guys. We will see you on the other side of these matchups when we're here to preview the Eastern and Western Conference Finals. But until then, I'm Brian. He's Tom. This has been our second round preview of the NHL playoffs on I-80 Sports.